He hesitated before he answered. I got a good look at his mind tonight, he began in a low voice. I'm not sure if there's anything I could have done to avoid this once he saw you. It is partially your fault. His voice was wry. If you didn't smell so appallingly luscious, he might not have bothered. But when I defended you, well, that made it a lot worse. He's not to being thwarted, no matter how insignificant the object. He thinks of himself as a hunter and nothing else. His existence is consumed with tracking, and a challenge is all he asks of life. Suddenly we presented him with a beautiful challenge. A large clan of strong fighters, all bent on protecting the one vulnerable element. You wouldn't believe how euphoric he is now. It's his favorite game, and we've just made it his most exciting game ever. His tone was full of disgust. He paused a moment. But if I have stood by, he would have killed you right then, he said with hopeless frustration. I thought I didn't smell the same to others as I do to you, I said hesitantly. You don't. But that doesn't mean that you aren't still a temptation to every one of them. If you had appealed to the tracker, or any of them, the same way you appealed to me, it would have meant a fight right there. I shuddered. I don't think I have any choice but to kill him now, he muttered. Carla won't like it. I could hear the tires cross the bridge. Though I couldn't see the river in the dark, I knew we were getting close. I had to ask him now. How can you kill a vampire? He glanced at me with unreadable eyes and his voice was suddenly harsh. The only way to be sure is to tear him to shreds and then burn the pieces. And the other two will fight with him? The woman will. I'm not sure about Laurent. They don't have a very strong bond. He's only with them for convenience. He was embarrassed by James in the meadow. But James and the woman, they'll try to kill you? I asked, my voice raw. Bella, don't you dare waste time worrying about me. Your only concern is to keep yourself safe, and please, please, trying not to be reckless. Is he still following? Yes, he won't attack the house though, not tonight. He turned off into the invisible drive with Alice following behind. We drove right up to the house. The lights inside were bright, but they did little to alleviate the blackness of the encroaching forest. Emmett had my door open before the truck was stopped. He pulled me out of the seat, tucked me like a football into his vast chest, and ran me through the door. We burst into the large white room. Edward and Alice at our sides. All of them were there. They were already on their feet at the sound of our approach. Laurent stood in their midst. I could hear low growls rumble deep in Emmett's throat as he sat me down next to Edward. He's tracking us, Edward announced, glaring playfully at Laurent. Laurent's face was unhappy. I was afraid of that. Alice danced to Jasper's side and whispered in his ear. Her lips quivered with the speed of her silent speech. They flew up the stairs together. Rosalie watched them, and then moved quickly to Emmett's side. Her beautiful eyes were intense and, when they flickered unwilling in my face, furious. What will he do? Carlo asked Laurent in chilling tones. I'm sorry, he answered. I was afraid when your boy there defended her that it would set him off. Can you stop him? Laurent shook his head. Nothing stops James when he gets started. We'll stop him, Emmett promised. There was no doubt what he meant. You can't bring him down. I've never seen anything like him in my 300 years. He's absolutely lethal. That's why I joined his coven. His coven, I thought, of course. The show of leadership in the clearing was merely that, a show. Laurent was shaking his head. He glanced at me perplexed and back to Carlisle. Are you sure it's worth it? Edwards and Ridgewood filled the room. Laurent cringed back. Carlisle looked gravely at Laurent. I'm afraid you're going to have to make a choice. Laurent understood. He deliberated for a moment. His eyes took in every face and finally swept the bright room. I'm intrigued by the life you created here, but I won't get in the middle of this. I bear none of you any enmity, but I won't go against James. I think I'll head north to that clan in Denali. He hesitated. Don't underestimate James. He's got a brilliant mind and unparalleled senses. He's every bit as comfortable in a human world as you seem to be, and he won't come at you head on. I'm sorry for what's been unleashed here. Truly sorry. He bowed his head, but I saw him flicker another puzzled look at me. Go in peace, was Carlyle's formal answer. Laurent took another long look around himself, and then he hurried out the door. The silence lasted less than a second. How close? Carlyle looked at Edward. Esme was already moving. Her hand touched an inconspicuous keypad on the wall, and with a groan, huge metal shutters began sealing up the glass walls. I gaped. About 3 miles out past the river, he's circling around to meet up with the female. What's the plan? We'll lead him off, and then Jasper and Alice will run her south. And then... Edward's tone was deadly. As soon as Bella is clear, we hunt him. I guess there's no other choice, Carlo agreed, his face grim. Edward turned to Rosalie. Get her upstairs and trade clothes, Edward commanded. She stared back at him with livid disbelief. Why should I? She hissed. What is she to me, except a menace, a danger you've chosen to inflict on all of us? I flinched back from the venom in her voice. Rose, Emmett murmured, putting one hand on her shoulder. She shook it off. But I was watching Edward carefully, knowing his temper, worried about his reaction. He surprised me. He looked away from Rosalie as if she hadn't spoken, as if she didn't exist. Esme, he asked calmly. Of course, Esme murmured. Esme was at my side in half a heartbeat, swinging me up easily into her arms and dashing up the stairs before I can gasp in shock. What are we doing? I asked breathlessly as she sat me down in a dark room somewhere off the second-story hall. Trying to confuse the smell. It won't work for long, but it might help get you out. I could hear her clothes falling to the floor. I don't think I'll fit, I hesitated, but her hands were abruptly pulling my shirt over my head. I quickly stripped my jeans off myself. She handed me something. It felt like a shirt. I struggled to get my arms through the right holes. As soon as I was done, she handed me her slacks. I yanked them on, but I couldn't get my feet out. They were too long. She deftly rolled the hems a few times so that I could stand. Somehow she was already in my clothes. She pulled me back to the stairs where Alice stood, small leather bag in one hand. They each grabbed one of my elbows and half carried me as they flew down the stairs. It appeared that everything had been settled downstairs in our absence. Edward and Emmett were ready to leave, Emmett carrying a heavy-looking backpack over his shoulder. Carlyle was handing something small to Esme. He turned and handed Alice the same thing. It was a tiny silver cell phone. Esme and Rosalie will be taking your truck, Bella, he told me as he passed. I nodded, glancing warily at Rosalie. She was glowering at Carlyle with a resentful expression. Alice, Jasper, take the Mercedes. You'll need the dark tin in the south. They nodded as well. Will taking the Jeep. I was surprised to see that Carlo had intended to go with Edward. I realized suddenly with a stab of fear that they made up the hunting party. Alice, Carlo asked, will they take the bait? Everyone watched Alice as she closed her eyes and became incredibly still. Finally her eyes opened. He'll track you. The woman will follow the truck. We should be able to leave after that. Her voice was certain. Let's go. Carlo began to walk toward the kitchen. Whatever was at my side at once. He caught me up in one of his iron grasps, crutching me to him. He He seemed unaware of his watching family as he pulled me to his face, lifting my feet off the floor. For the shortest second, his lips were icy and hard against mine, and then it was over. He sat me down, still holding my face, his glorious eyes burning into mine. His face and his eyes went blank, curiously dead, and he turned away. And then they were gone. We stood there, the others looking away from me as the tears streaked noiselessly down my face. The silent moment dragged on, and then Esme's phone vibrated in her hand. It flashed to her ear. "Now," she said. Rosalie stalked out the front door without another glance in my direction, but Esme touched my cheek as she passed. "Be safe." Her whisper lingered behind them as they slipped out the door.